As violent crime continues to plague communities around the country, Democrats are trying desperately to spin the narrative, and they're actually suggesting that Republicans are the ones trying to defund the police. That would only make sense if you ignored the past year and a half of what Democrats have actually been saying. Friends, it's time for Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. Defund the police on the way out as a Democrat talking point, as a slogan that was used constantly in the early days of BLM 2.0 after the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. We were hearing it with great frequency, and now they're trying to tell us that something else is going on. In fact, just a little bit of a reminder. Here we have for you a montage of members of the squad, the members of Congress, far left members of Congress. Here's what they were saying not long ago about defund the police.
You can't really reform a department that is rotten to the root. What you can do is rebuild. The current infrastructure that exists as policing in our city should not exist anymore.
And it may sound strange, but many affluent suburbs have essentially already begun pursuing a defunding of the police, in that they fund schools, they fund housing, and they fund healthcare more as their number one priority.
Yes, I support the defund movement because this is about the investment in our communities, which have historically been divested. This is about true reparation.
Yeah, that's what they were saying. I mean, just to be very clear, and there are many, many, many other Democrats and voices in the media who were all about defund. They thought that this was a rallying cry. It was a civil rights moment, in fact. Get rid of police budgets, get rid of police forces. Well, now, that was from a year ago mostly. Now here we are 12 months later, and we're seeing the results of this, frankly, idiotic slogan and movement and everything that came from it. The city of Oakland, for example, last week voted to divert $17 million from its police budget. I mean, compared to last year, the city has seen a 95% increase in homicides, and a 70% increase in shootings, an 11% increase in robberies, an 88% increase in carjackings. Here's what Oakland's police chief, LaRon Armstrong, had to say about the budget cut.
So we see clearly that crime is out of control in the city of Oakland, and our response was for less police resources. I want to address a comment that was made by one of our city leaders during these budget meetings. It was referred to as a bump in the road, a speed bump, that we would go through a period where there would be speed bumps and there would be challenges and things may not go right, but we would be okay. Well, for me, those speed bumps are 65 lives so far this year. Victims who have suffered at the hands of violence, whether it's shootings, robberies, carjackings, sexual assaults. All of these crimes are not speed bumps. These are people. Yes,
there are lives that are being lost in greater numbers than what would have been expected based upon data from previous years, and this is happening all over the country. There's clearly a crime wave. That's beyond dispute, and that means that people are dying, people are being lost as a result of it. What does the left say about this? What does the defund the police Democrat movement have to say for itself now? Well, for one thing, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez appeared earlier this week on the internet to tell everybody that this is really an issue of hysteria. Let's play that.
We are seeing these headlines about percentage increases. Now, I want to say that any amount of harm is unacceptable and too much. But I also want to make sure that this hysteria, that this doesn't drive a hysteria, and that we look at these numbers in context so that we can make responsible decisions about what to allocate in that context.
What is the context we need for a 50, 60, 70% increase in a major U.S. city in homicides other than it's awful and needs to stop? What's the context other than clearly the Democrats' defund movement was moronic beyond words, and now here we are, the American people, suffering as a result of it? They're just hoping to come up with something else, and they're seeing the political consequences of this on the horizon. They're very concerned, especially with the midterms that are already looking to be quite a fight for Democrats, based upon polling and the realities of the country under the Biden administration. Here's a defund poll, though. This is from USA Today and Ipsos. 18% of Americans polled support defunding the police. Also known as the radical left fringe of the Democrat Party, or the radical left, the hardcore left. And I assure you, a lot of that 18% are upper income white liberals. They're the ones that are always big proponents of this kind of stuff. And the activists out there, people who actually live in neighborhoods where there's high crime, do not agree with this. 58% nationwide, just to be clear, I mean, solid majority oppose defunding the police. And when you look in minority communities specifically, they want the same or more police presence in their neighborhoods. So what does this leave the Democrats with? Well, a lot of egg on their face, a lot of a mess to clean up here. And so what are they going to do? Lie about it. I mean, here's Jen Psaki spinning like you've never seen before that, maybe it's Republicans who are to blame for the defund movement.
Something one of the advisors said this weekend, Cedric Richmond, he said, Republicans defunded the police by not supporting the American Rescue Plan. But how is it that is an argument to be made when the president never mentioned needing money for police to stop a crime wave when he was selling the American Rescue Plan?
Well, the president did mention that the American Rescue Plan, the state and local funding, something that was supported by the president, a lot of Democrats who supported and voted for the bill, could help ensure local cops were kept on the beat in communities across the country. As you know, didn't receive a single Republican vote. That funding has been used to keep cops on the beat.
I mean, it's such dishonest nonsense, isn't it? Yeah. That's really what the American Rescue Plan was all about. It was about funding cops, which no one, I mean, you're watching this right now. Do you remember anyone saying that? No, of course not. Do you think that Republicans would have opposed that? But also, it was a huge bill. We're talking about $1 trillion bill here where they're putting all kinds of stuff in there. So if they really cared about funding the police or adding funding to police budgets, why not just say, let's do that right now? Put it forward on the floor. Let's see. Come on, Democrats. Let's put forward additional funding for law enforcement across the country. Go for it. Let's see you do it. Oh, that's right. That would upset the lunatic left-wing Democrats that want to get rid of police, and they won't do that even though people are dying and cities are getting worse as a result of this idiocy. It's all very predictable, but it's still disheartening that one of the major political parties in this country could have gone down this path of lunacy as long as they did, and that a lot of innocent people had to suffer. And a lot of law enforcement had to take it on the chin, had to just deal with the slap in the face here from Democrats who, at the first moment of political advantage, will throw our men and women in uniform right under the bus. Could care less. All right, coming up in just a moment here, we got more on the Defund the Police spin with retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent James Gagliano. Stay right there. I've been telling you for a while now about online thieves who can easily steal your home's title, but you don't have to take my word for it. Take it from this thief who stole over 150 homes and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. This is why you need Home Title Lock.
Nobody thinks that I can take their house and borrow against the house. No, I have title insurance for that. No, it's in my name, or he would have to get some special document. They would call me. Nobody's calling you. After I've stolen the title, borrowed against it, or sold the property, or done whatever I've done with it, it's 60 to 90 days to even figure out that they're the victim of this crime. By that point, you start getting foreclosure notices, and you realize you've got 4 mortgages on your house. Not only that, you don't even own your home anymore. It's not even in your name.
Heard enough? Don't let this crime happen to you. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim, and enter code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at HometitleLock.com. Police departments around the country are being stretched to their limits, not only trying to fight rising crime rates, but in many Democrat-run cities, shrinking budgets. In Oakland, California, the mayor warned that the city council's decision to slash its police force's budget could lead to the loss of at least 50 police officers, potentially causing a domino effect of fewer patrols, slower response times, and a further rise in crime. All right, joining me now, retired FBI supervisory special agent and a member of the board of directors for the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, James Gagliano. James, great to have you.
Buck, good to join you tonight. I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation.
Tell me, just at the 30,000-foot level, we're 12 months into this BLM 2.0, defund the police narrative from the Democrats. What's happened?
So I think we're moving from the Ferguson effect, which took place in 2014. You'll remember the shooting of Michael Brown took place in Ferguson in the summer of 2014. We had a lot of riots as a result of that, even though the Department of Justice at the time, that was run by Eric Holder, and President Barack Obama was obviously in charge of the executive branch at the time. We had a lot of riots. We had a lot of unrest. Violent crime skyrocketed. Buck, we're now moving into what is being referred to as the Minneapolis effect. And the Minneapolis effect is this new construct, which is defunding the police or reimagining public safety. And what it does is it directs money away from police departments and puts it into things like violence disruption and moving things into social services and things like that. Those are all important aspects. But right now, with this giant spike that we're seeing across a lot of the urban areas across the country, it's dangerous, it's counterproductive. And if Black and brown lives matter, as we all know that they do, they're not when this occurs. We're going to see a return to what happened in the 1970s and the 1980s in urban areas, Buck, if we're not too careful.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you've seen anything like this in the past, given that you're hearkening back now to decades, previous decades, that we have to go quite far back in history to get there. I mean, what can be done at this stage to really turn this around?
So it's simple. It's like, it's what works, right? I spent 25 years in the FBI. I showed up in New York City as a young 26-year-old FBI agent in 1991. At that year, New York suffered the most homicides in New York City's history. 2,262 people were killed. The vast majority of the victims, people of color. The vast majority of perpetrators, people of color. When I left the FBI in 2016 in New York City, we had reduced, and when I say we, law enforcement writ large, had reduced the homicides underneath 300 people. Now, that's 300 too many, but that was a 90% reduction in crime and violent crime and homicides. And you know what caused it, Buck? You know, people argue that correlation isn't necessarily causality. And now that I'm in the academic side of things, I hear that all the time. And they'll argue, well, what Giuliani and Bratton did and what Ray Kelly did back in the 90s and 2000s, that doesn't necessarily mean that what they did translated into those successes, because there are more Starbucks in New York City. So maybe that was the cause. And I'm being facetious, but correlation in this instance does equal causality. So what are the things that caused it? Broken windows policing. What is broken windows policing? It means if you allow the little things to fester, the people jumping the turnstiles on the subway, the people playing their music too loud, the people urinating in the street or smoking marijuana on a street corner, if you allow those little things to fester, it leads to bigger things. And that's what Police Commissioner Bratton understood only too well. Broken windows policing, stop, question, and frisk, and CompStat. Those three things now, Buck, are all considered to be racist anachronisms. And so they've all been removed from not just New York City, where Mayor de Blasio is in charge, but across the country. And I fear what's going to happen, especially as this summer moves on, the heat ticks up, and I fear that we're going to move into a period that's going to be reminiscent of the 70s and the 80s.
In addition to slashing budgets, as part of the defund narrative, Democrats are also targeting qualified immunity for police, which limits individual liability for officers. The qualified immunity does, who are performing their jobs. Just want to have everyone look at what Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of the Squad said about qualified immunity recently.
Qualified immunity is an unjust doctrine that has been codified in statute after statute that has allowed for law enforcement to operate with callous disregard of black and brown bodies, with reckless impunity for our lives without any consequences.
Without any consequences, she says. What do you say to that?
So, with all due respect to the Congresswoman, I think that there is a general lack of understanding of what qualified immunity is. Qualified immunity does not protect bad cops. If a cop acts criminally, if a cop acts illegally, they are not protected under the construct of their job. What qualified immunity does is it looks at what a reasonable person, a reasonable police officer, a reasonable law enforcement officer is conducting their duties. And when they do that in good faith, they are protected, because police officers, unlike me and you, Buck, they are making decisions in real time. So in low light conditions, they're doing it without the benefit of being able to slow down the video and make a determination after the fact and be a Monday morning quarterback. That's what qualified immunity does. It says if an officer is acting in good faith, is not conducting anything illegal, if it's not doing anything outside the scope of their duties, they are protected criminally from being prosecuted. It's not bad cops. Derek Chauvin was not blessed with the benefit of qualified immunity. He was convicted of murder. But the vast majority of police officers in this country that are doing their job righteously every single day, Buck, they deserve that protection. And if they lose it, good luck recruiting and retaining members of the force.
Do you think the tide is turning because of the incredibly disturbing numbers we're seeing of increases in shootings and homicides across the country? Are we reaching the tipping point now where enough Americans have seen the truth that even the Democrats are going to have to pull back on the defund madness?
I don't think so. I think there's going to have to be a lot more bad things are going to have to occur before I think we pull back. Look, everything in the country is always a pendulum. It swings one way and then the other. And sometimes if we go too far in one direction, we over course correct the other way. Buck, we're in an over course correction right now. Shootings are down. And I'll give you a quick statistic right here. I'm studying the NYPD as part of my doctoral dissertation in police use of force at St. John's University in Queens. In 1972, police officers in New York City discharged their firearms 994 times. 9 years ago, it was 90 times. And now, last year, less than 20. Police are far more restrained than they are being portrayed by the media. And look, I spent 4 years at CNN as a law enforcement analyst. I know how the narrative can be built. And I know about the availability heuristic, which means the more we put things in front of the American public and they see it, they just sense that as, well, that's got to be the way that it is. The statistics do not. They do not correlate with what the facts that are being expressed out there are. And that's a frustrating thing. Police officers are far more restrained. They're far more judicious than they were 10 years, 20 years, hell, 5 years ago, but they're not getting that credit in the media today, Buck.
James, appreciate the expertise. We'll have you back soon.
Sounds good, Buck. Thanks for having me.
Many of us have been predicting that extended unemployment benefits could delay Americans getting back into the workforce. Well, it turns out we were right. Trish Regan, host of the Trish Intel podcast, joins us next to discuss the post-COVID unemployment situation. Stay with us for that. We're living in very uncertain times, and being prepared for the unknown is more important than ever. I'm sure you've noticed the world we live in today is anything but predictable. The government is passing massive spending bills. The Federal Reserve is printing trillions of dollars in fiat currency, and many experts are predicting inflation could run rampant in the coming months. That could spell disaster for the dollars in your bank account. We could all benefit from something a little more reliable right about now. Well, what could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can actually hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group right now and learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now at 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Call them right now at 833-600-GOLD. One more time, that's 833-600-GOLD. We've seen staggering unemployment numbers since the beginning of COVID-19 lockdowns. And now the conservatives who have been sounding the alarm on these extended benefits and getting people back to work have data to back up their argument. Take a look at it. A new analysis by the financial firm Jefferies finds the number of people getting extended unemployment benefits went down faster in 22 states that canceled those payments this month than in states that said they'd end the benefits later in the summer. Here to weigh in, Trish Regan, host of the Trish Regan Show, podcast you should all check out. Trish, as always, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Buck.
This seems pretty straightforward, right? If you give people free money and they can make close to or perhaps even more they would by working, why would they go back to work?
Well, they don't, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. Americans are pretty smart, intelligent people. And, you know, in many cases, they have families. They might want to explore another business opportunity on the side. Why are they going to go back to work? I mean, so they're not going back to work, except in the states that have gotten rid of the federal unemployment benefits. And so what you're seeing is some of the red states, right, are back in business because those leaders have said, yeah, this isn't going to fly. Like, we have an economy that's got to actually run. And so they've said enough. We're ending these benefits now, not in the fall, but now. And consequently, they're actually faring much, much better. In other words, we're just going to prolong this. The longer we say, okay, well, we're going to extend these unemployment benefits, the more you're encouraging people to sit at home. As I say, Uncle Joe wants you, like Uncle Sam wants you, to sit at home on the couch. Do nothing.
And yet, Democrats are now talking about how they want to spend even more money with this infrastructure deal, that they would also get more money thrown into it from a reconciliation package, perhaps. That will be no Republican votes whatsoever, just Democrats ramming through whatever they want. I mean, it seems like, Trish, we're running an experiment here to see what the outer limits are of government spending before everyone recognizes that running the printing press can't be the answer to everything. If it were, then we should just give everybody $1 million.
Yeah. Look, you can't run a printing press. I'm sort of amazed by this. You know, it's not that hard. The Trump administration, they did this right when it came to economic policy. And what did you see as a result? You saw median incomes go up for the first 3 years of his administration until, you know, we shut down the economy. But this was an example of how, if you put the right policies in place and you get out of the way, well, people can do what they know how to do, and that's earn money and run successful businesses, and the rest is history. You can just go back and look at the numbers, compare and contrast that with the Barack Obama, Joe Biden years, where we actually saw median incomes decline, right? The rich got richer because they were invested in the market and the government was printing money courtesy of the Federal Reserve. And so that had an effect on the dollar, et cetera. You had inflation in the stock market. You had inflation in terms of energy prices at that time, in terms of food and energy, you know, the things that people actually consume. And yet simultaneously, Buck, the middle class really lost out, in part because they had to pay more for food and energy, and in part because they weren't invested at the same rate as some of the wealthier people. Well, it's like deja vu, right? Here we are again, which is why I encourage people to be in the market. As much as this feels like sort of frothy, it's like, well, this is going to continue as long as the Federal Reserve is there to back it up, along with Joe Biden and company and the Democrats looking to spend money themselves. I mean, it is one big giant party. But at some point, it's going to be a problem. But right now, I keep looking at it and saying, you know, we're not there yet. So therefore, you want to still be invested.
Another topic I wanted to throw your way, Trish. You wrote recently an article saying that investors are getting nervous over the Delta variant of the COVID COVID-19 virus. What do you mean? What do you see?
Well, I think there's a lot of concern, specifically in Europe, and that's spilling over to back here at home. They're sort of, frankly, silly for getting this worried this soon. I mean, you have only to look at this movie that we've all seen before just last year and change. And what did we see? The market actually did crazy well, right? So, you can try and, back off as an investor, but my sense is when everybody starts getting scared like that, take that as an opportunity. I said that back in March of 2020 when the market was tanking like 1,000 points a day. I'm like, but actually this is an opportunity because this is not a systemic crisis. Not yet, anyway. The Fed could make it. Joe Biden could make it a systemic crisis if they continue the money printing forever, which leads to all kinds of other problems. And, the law of unintended consequences starts to kick in. Right now, Buck, look, I mean, if in fact we have to shut down our economy again, which I sort of doubt, but if we did, we know we can get through it, right? So why would you back off being invested right now? If anything, you'd say, oh, well, look, tech companies did really well during. You can learn from sort of history if you would. This is not a 2008 scenario. If worse comes to worse and things do get kind of treacherous and they do try and shut down the economy again, I still think that the market is okay and shareholders should be smart enough to know that.
Trish, always good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Anytime, Buck. Thank you.
For over a decade now, singer Britney Spears has had virtually no control over her own affairs, having been placed under a legally mandated conservatorship led by her father. Now the Princess of Pop wants out. She wants her freedom. After the break, the First TV's Morgan Zegers joins us to discuss this celebrity drama.
My doctor had me on 6 different nurses with this new medication come to my home, stay with me, to monitor me on this new medication, which I never wanted to be on to begin with. Not only did my family not do a thing, my dad was all for it. Anything that happened to me had to be approved by my dad. I cried on the phone for an hour and he loved every minute of it. The control he had over someone as powerful as me, as he loved the control to hurt his own daughter 100,000%. He loved it. I work 7 days a week, no days off, which in California, the only similar thing to this is called sex trafficking. After I've lied and told the whole world I'm okay and I'm happy, it's a lie. All I want is to own my money for this to end and my boyfriend to drive me in his car. And I would honestly like to sue my family, to be totally honest with you.
Wow. The hashtag Free Britney movement is really getting a lot of attention after Britney Spears gave a bombshell testimony last week claiming her conservatorship is abusive. Yesterday, the singer's younger sister, Jamie Lynn Spears, finally broke her silence on the situation. Watch.
Now that she's very clearly spoken and said what she needed to say, I feel like I can follow her lead and say what I feel I need to say. Maybe I didn't support her the way the public would like me to, with a hashtag on a public platform, but I can assure you that I've supported my sister long before there was a hashtag, and I'll support her long after.
Here to react, a contributor to the First TV and founder of Young Americans Against Socialism, Morgan Zegers. Morgan, good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Buck.
So some people watching right now aren't really going to be familiar with some of the background here. Before we get into the big public statement that Britney Spears put out last week and what that means going forward, how did we get to this point where a pop star, really a pop icon, is in the headlines for a legal arrangement that a lot of people have never even really heard of unless someone is at end of life care level and needs someone to make all their decisions for them?
Yeah, well, you kind of hit the nail on the head right there. I find myself to be, quite in the know with policy, and I'm a little political nerd, I would say. And I had no idea about the policy and the law behind what Britney Spears is going through with this conservatorship. And so I've been looking a lot into it, too. And I've got to tell you, I'm pretty shocked by it. And I think this overall is making a lot of Americans more aware of the situation to begin with, and questioning more so autonomy and what it means to really be in control of yourself as an adult. I mean, she's 39 years old.
And how did this even happen? So a judge decided that she needed a conservatorship, which meant that her father was put in a position to make all decisions about her, I believe even reproductive matters were thrown into this, into some of the issues here. I mean, really deeply personal stuff. All of her finances, her work schedule. Her dad was in charge of all that? Why?
Yeah, and so basically there was a legal ruling, that Britney Spears wasn't capable of taking care of herself, and her father was put in charge of all of her life decisions. And so in that video that you showed, she says, "I just want to be able to ride in the car with my boyfriend." So that gives a pretty good glimpse as to how much she was controlled. But you touched on the birth control aspect, the reproductive aspect. Britney's 39 years old, and she has a boyfriend. She seems like a normal adult. It looks like this was really a setup to control her, and she's wanted to have children. Well, Buck, I'm sorry, but women only have a decade or 15 years to reproduce. After that, there really isn't a lot of chances, and it turns out that the doctors and her dad put an IUD in her, which prevents you from having babies, and she was forced to keep it in her body for years. An IUD can last from 3 years to 5 years, but either way, she's had it in her system all of her reproductive years, and now she's 39, which it's incredibly hard to get pregnant after that. And it's really a tragic thing. It makes you rethink of that "my body, my choice" saying that the left always uses, but flipped, right? I mean, the idea of motherhood being prevented is a shame.
Now, where does this go? The Free Britney movement, obviously online, is getting a lot of attention. I think the media, quite honestly, would be more in her corner if she hadn't said nice things in the past about President Bush. And I believe that there's a little bit of a Republican bias thing that goes on here. If she were someone that was beloved by the left, they might make even more noise about this. But there's clearly some attention on this now. What's supposed to happen next? I mean, is she going to be freed?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in the dark on this, but it being Britney Spears, I mean, I was a very young girl when I grew up listening to her songs, and that song, Lucky, about a girl with everything that you can imagine, but still being so sad on the inside, I really see that song in a different light now. And it really is just a very sad situation that most of us, we don't really know what's going to happen next. And so it looks like she is very capable of controlling her own life. It looks like what was done to her is very unjust. And so really the next steps, I think, are for her to just go through that legal battle. But of course, the moral arc of the universe is long. It does bend towards justice, though. And so I think this is going to be a long legal battle. This is also a very hard time for her family, where, yes, the public is now putting their 2 cents into everything that they've been dealing with for over a decade now. So there's a lot to look into it, but I think it's just more so that Americans didn't even know this could really happen to someone. And this is really a shocker for many of us to hear. And I think now we care about it specifically because it was Britney Spears of all people.
Also want to get your take as a former high-level athlete yourself. U.S. Olympic hammer thrower Gwen Berry turned her back on the American flag during a medal ceremony at the U.S. track and field trials. She won the bronze. Here's the photo that's become very famous now. She says that she's representing those who have been killed by systemic racism. America hating is kind of fashionable now in some places, isn't it, Morgan?
It is. And unfortunately, as a society, as a country, we've set the precedent that it's the cool thing to do and that it's acceptable, that it's okay to embarrass America on the world stage and to call out every flaw that we might have had as a country, when I can't think of a perfect country in existence. If anything, I think America is really exceptional in the fact that we have made progress on so many things. And I mean real progress, not leftist progress that actually results in regress. But my first thought with this is, of course, I don't want her thrown in jail, right, for not singing the national anthem or putting her hand on her heart or being happy that it was playing. This is not a communist regime here in America. But what happened to consequences? Why do all of these athletes and why do all of these leftist people that go in the public and embarrass us and say really ridiculous things and act like children, why are there no consequences for their actions as adults? I think that's what's missing here. If she's going on a team to represent America, are there not rules or requirements or standards for codes of conduct that they need to follow to not embarrass us on the world stage? And then second, I think this is just indicative of the greater trend that we're seeing here, where people don't have a respect for our founding, a respect for our founders, a respect for our founding documents, how they were individually pieced together with ideas from every failure throughout history on what went wrong here. Okay, how can we make that better in America when we try it this time? It was genius. It was flawed, but it was genius. And so the lack of understanding and the basic ignorance that we have in this country now, and now it's being exacerbated by the 1619 Project and the CRT that's being pushed into schools, It's an absolute shame because this is being normalized and it's just going to get worse. I hate to say it, but it's just going to get worse. And I do think, to kind of close it off on a positive note for you, Buck, the third thought that I had is, wow, this is a really unifying moment for us, because I think a lot of people probably looked at that and said, ew, that is not what I represent. Maybe I am frustrated with America right now, but I don't support this. And so I think, if anything, it could be a unifying, more patriotic moment for the people that don't agree with this athlete that came in third place.
I appreciate what my friend Ryan Gerdusky put out on Twitter, which is maybe we should spend more time celebrating the first and second place finishers, because after all, they were first and second. Good to see you, Morgan. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Buck.
Just when you thought mask mandates were a thing of the past, which you wouldn't if you watched the show, because I told you they're not going away. But here they go again. The full story is in Quick Hits tonight. Stay there. If you're anything like me, you got to start your day with some caffeine to get it all going. And for me, that means kicking off my morning with Black Rifle Coffee. Not only is it some of the best coffee I've ever tasted, it's a veteran-owned company that serves premium coffee to people who love America. Black Rifle Coffee is continually committed to supporting veteran law enforcement and first responder causes. This summer, Black Rifle invites you to enjoy your coffee. Not just the great taste, but also the places you drink it, the passion and adventure it fuels and inspires, and the entertainment Black Rifle serves along the way. Whether you're brewing the perfect cup of pour-over before kicking ass at work or cracking a can of 300 on your next backcountry mission, Black Rifle Coffee Company is here to fuel your way wherever the summer takes you. Black Rifle Coffee imports its high-quality coffee beans from all over the world and roasts them 5 days a week at their facilities in Manchester, Tennessee and Salt Lake City, Utah. The team at Black Rifle Coffee is continually researching and experimenting with new roasting methods and coffee origins. Purchase now at blackriflecoffee.com/buck. That's blackriflecoffee.com/buck. Use code BUCK at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Fuel your summer with America's coffee, Black Rifle Coffee. Mask mandates return to Los Angeles, and a Democrat blames the Miami building collapse on climate change. Oh, we will get into this. Those stories in Quick Hits. Let's dive in. First off, I have been telling you on this show 4 months now that until we have a full repudiation of Fauciism, until people recognize to Fauci as effectively a curse word, until they understand what the full implications are of Dr. Fauci's lockdown mania for this country and how unhelpful and destructive it was, we are just waiting for the next lockdown. Well, you may have gotten a preview of what is to come here, especially as we have this Delta variant out there. The media is becoming quite hysterical over this, but they've been doing that for a long time now. Oh, just wait 2 weeks or wait 2 months and you'll see the worst is yet to come. And in this case, they're not saying it's going to be the worst it's ever been, but they are saying that we are about to go through another serious wave. And so what are they telling us? Even if you are vaccinated in Los Angeles right now, you are supposed to mask up indoors. LA County's public health department reinstated the indoor mask mandate regardless of vaccination status due to the Delta variant. And they say that CDC officials are rethinking prevention measures even for the vaccinated. This is outrageous. It's stupid. It's control freakism. And yet, this is who the Democrats are. It's like they haven't learned anything from all the stuff we've been through, all the data we've seen. They still want to tell you, even if you are vaccinated, which means your chance of getting this is tiny. Even if you're vaccinated, they say you have to mask up indoors in Los Angeles. This will probably be followed by other cities that take the same position. It is very likely there'll be other places where you are told now, vaccinated or not, you are going to have to mask up. So that's something that we have to take into account going forward. Also, there's a company that has created Immuniband vaccination bracelets with a QR code. So now that's right. All this Orwellian, Big Brother, futuristic surveillance state stuff that some of us have been worried about from the very beginning, it is coming to pass right now. You're seeing this stuff out there, and there are prominent voices among Democrats and leftists who really want to make this, want to make vaccinations mandatory for everyone, including children. They're hoping they're going to get there. They're hoping that they can continue the pressure and eventually the Biden administration will come up with some executive order and just say you have to do it. And then there will of course, be more of the lockdown madness, more of the mandates about masks and all these different so-called COVID prevention measures that don't prevent COVID. It just doesn't work. I mean, they can keep talking about this as though it was all such a big success, even though we had over 100 million people that got infected despite all the lockdowns. And now that means when you add the number of people with vaccinations, we should be at or close to herd immunity or something very near herd immunity nationwide, but yet the fear mongering continues. They act as though if they aren't in charge, if there is not some next hysterical series of measures from Dr. Fauci, we are all going to get COVID again and it's going to be this nightmare. It's just wrong. And there should be people that are willing to fight against this now. If you allow them to, they're going to continue to slap masks on your face. They're going to continue to tell you that this has to happen, that this is where we have to go. And it's not going to stop. There'll be mask mandates. There'll be closures of different businesses. There'll be indoor limitations, as though this was ever really able to be enforced. No, it's just an excuse for the state to control and the state to harass. And that's central to all of this and has been central to all of it the whole time. And then you have some of the people who are in this administration who are so stupid that the fact that they're cabinet level officers of the United States government is an embarrassment. And Jennifer Granholm, the energy secretary, is really at the top of the list. As you know, there has been this awful tragedy of a building collapse in northern Miami Beach, and you have over 100 people that are still missing, and the time for which it would be possible to find survivors in that rubble is rapidly approaching when that's just not possible. So everyone's very upset about this, and there's a lot that's going to have to be looked at with regard to building inspections and engineering and what exactly went on here. But the energy secretary for the Biden administration wants you to know that, maybe this is a climate change thing.
We've been talking a lot about what happened in Florida at the Surfside condominium building that collapsed. We don't know exactly what happened at this point. But given what we know about the changing climate, given that we've seen an increase in these so-called extraordinary tides and the impact that that can have in areas like South Florida, do you think that climate could have played a role in that building's collapse?
Well, obviously we don't know fully, but we do know that the seas are rising. I mean, we know that we're losing inches and inches of beaches, not just in Florida, but all around.
I mean, how dumb are we all going to be here? How much of this are we really supposed to sit through? It does make you wonder. This is the left's religion. Everything can be taken back to climate change. And that also means that everything that they need to do to control you as a result of saving us from the existential threat of climate change, they are more than willing to do. But we'll continue to watch this. That's it for tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is up next. Shields high.